Now that we had a look at the basics of the two loop constructs we have in Python, let's dive into conditionals. And that means if statements, or if-else statements, as you can see. What's a if-else statement? Consider this case, which we'll kind of implement in just a second. We get some user input with the input function. But of course, you could have any other event, any data you get from any source. And now this data might be in a certain form. It might hold a certain value. Let's say we're fetching the user name here. The user might enter his correct name, in my case, Max. Of course, the user might also enter something invalid, maybe an empty string, anything like that. Now in our program, we maybe want to execute different code for the different inputs. For the correct name, we want to create a user. And if the input was empty, we want to execute an empty function which prompts the user again, maybe, something like that. So depending on certain conditions, on certain data, we want to execute certain code. And that is a pretty common scenario. Of course, not just for user input, but for any kind of problems you face in your programs. You got some data that's changed in a way that you can't predict for sure, and then you got different code that should execute depending on what the result is. And for that, we use an if statement. With that, we can check if user input has a certain value, and if that is the case, we execute a certain code, like create user if the value is max. Otherwise, or else, in the notation of Python, we execute different code. Now let's actually use that, and let's use it in our program here to let the user really control what he wants to do in the infinite loop.